So let me begin with some quotes by Srila Prabhupada. Oh. These are very beautiful quotes by Srila Prabhupada. He said wonderful things about the importance of reading Srimad Bhagavatam with our children. So I'm going to read these quotes for you. So please listen carefully. Our students specifically, they should take care of reading Srimad Bhagavatam. We have therefore prescribed in our school, Dallas, and from the very beginning, if they begin education with Bhagavad Gita and then come to Srimad Bhagavatam and read the whole literature, then they will be more than MA, PhD. Even astronomy, astrology, politics, sociology, atomic theory, everything is there. Therefore, if we study Srimad Bhagavatam very carefully, then you get all knowledge completely. Throughout the whole world, whatever knowledge is there is in the Srimad Bhagavatam. If one simply reads this Srimad Bhagavatam, his education is topmost. If one studies Srimad Bhagavatam, he is well versed in every subject matter. So Srila Prabhupada, when he was here, he stressed three things. Three things was of utmost importance for him. And one, like anybody would guess, would be book distribution. Secondly, deity worship. And the third was Gurukula. Srila Prabhupada was very, very keen on preparing the right environment for our future children. He said, our children are not ordinary children because they've already done a lot of devotion service in their past life, and they are here in our families just to finish up the task. Therefore, as parents, we should give them that facility to make it their last life. Now, Prabhupada said that if we raise a generation of exemplary Vaishnava children, that will be the future of our movement, and that will be the future of your country as well. He knew that an education which is steeped in Vedic culture and character, that will make a generation of children who everybody, the whole world will be proud of, who can do amazing things for the world. For example, we see now today, the world is full of, Prabhupada said, full of debauchees and fallen people. And these people, they come from those people who are also well educated. So education in itself does not provide good character. But Vedic education is different, he said. Why? Because Vedic education can inculcate in us and our children good character such as tolerance, how to be tolerant, mercy, compassion, self-control. Now we know that Srila Prabhupada, he came to this country not so much to open temples, but the heart of his desire was to give this knowledge. He saw that as crucial to change the lives of the impious lives of this misdirected civilization. And for that reason, from day one, he began translating Srimad Bhagavatam. And he would barely sleep like 4 hours a night and would be translating these verses into these beautiful purports. All Prabhupada's all ecstasy and all his realizations are contained in these purports. So the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam is not only important for the adults, but also for our children. Because when the children grow up with this kind of knowledge, by the time they become youth, they are their foundation is so strong that no matter wherever they go, in whichever environment they may be, they will be well situated. As parents and teachers, they pick up our character, they pick up our own qualities. Therefore, when we provide them this good example that Srimad Bhagavatam gives and our own example, then we can expect these children to become very, very special. So Prabhupada, we know that he undertook so much austerity just to give us this knowledge. He was translating these books when he left family life in Vrindavan, when he was there for 6 years. And under such austerity, he translated these books. And then he went to Delhi to get them printed. And we know that under such hardship, he took a cargo ship to come to America. And even on the ship, he was trying to sell these books that he had translated. And then when he came to America, he was robbed and attacked, and he lost everything. But Prabhupada, like a true soldier, he did not give up. And he saw this as such an important mission to give this knowledge, that during his time, as these books were being translated, there were devotees out there who were actually distributing even the higher cantos, all the way to ninth canto, and then Krishna book. So, and now I want to tell you a little bit about my own experience of teaching Srimad Bhagavatam to my children. Now, when my children were getting of school age, when it was time for them to go to school, I was looking for private schools to put my children in. And then I did put them in a school for about a couple of years. And I would volunteer in that school to do some, volunteer work, just so I could see what was going on. And very soon, I was actually very disappointed. Why? Because I could see that the values that were being taught in the schools, they were not the values that I would want to inculcate in my children. And so at a certain point, I decided that I'm going to try something alternative. At that time, homeschooling was getting quite popular in America. And I thought, okay, well, I was really actually nervous. So I thought, okay, why don't I try it out in summer for 3 months? And then if that works, then they can, I can continue to teach them, and otherwise they can go to school. And then what happened is, just in 3 months of summer, they had finished the entire year's curriculum, and they were barely studying like 2 hours a day uh, of actual schoolwork. So I thought, well, this is not very difficult. Maybe I can do this. But then very soon I got disenchanted with that, and I wanted to make my own curriculum. So I began, of course, to make a curriculum from Srila Prabhupada's books would be an immense task. So I started just simply reading and discussing Srimad Bhagavatam with them. Now I know most of you out there, you cannot homeschool. There are different laws in different countries. You may not be able to do that. My purpose here is not to, ask you to homeschool. My purpose here is to give you the tools by which you can teach this great literature to your children, even if they're going to school. Because by teaching the scriptures, specifically Srimad Bhagavatam, one can actually develop a mood and environment in the home, and children can actually learn all these subjects and become very strong in a foundational way. Just 5 or 6 years of teaching them Srimad Bhagavatam will cover every subject matter, like Prabhupada is saying in these quotes, right? That it will cover every subject matter in the world. And once they've understood these subject matters from the Vedic perspective, then no matter what, and no matter later on when they study these subjects, they will not go blindfolded. In other words, they will always see the Vedic perspective, and they will not be sidetracked into materialism or atheism. And this was my experience, my own experience. Just after 6 years of studying Srimad Bhagavatam with my children, I could see that the process was working. The children looked happy, they looked well educated. And after studying 2 or 3 hours of Srimad Bhagavatam with them, we would go out and actually practically apply those principles. We were doing a lot of outreach programs, giving this knowledge to the outside world in different ways, doing school programs, for example. We would set up tables and distribute books and prasadam. We took every opportunity, whatever the city could provide, in order to give this knowledge. And so in this way, I realized the process was working. The amazing thing was that when I started teaching them Srimad Bhagavatam, I myself had not read Srimad Bhagavatam. I was studying it for the first time with them. But because as adults we have so much experience in life, that we are able to give them a more experienced perspective than them, even though we may not have read Srimad Bhagavatam in our life before. So okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the spiritual benefits from reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, one thing that children really, really need are good role models. We see how children, they love to imitate. Now, especially in the first 5 years, a child will, you can pretty much predict the future of a child by the way his environment is. In other words, if you put good role models in front of the child, we can pretty much be assured that the child will uh, become will follow in those footsteps of those great role models, right? Today, unfortunately, we see that the whole world is full with role models that are not very good. They're morally degraded, right? So we see the children trying to imitate such role models. If there are some good, decent ones, very soon um, the character is they fall down, you know, because from Srimad Bhagavatam we understand that in this world today there's no pure goodness. Any goodness is always contaminated with passion and ignorance, and very soon that's why the children get either they get very disappointed, or if they were to imitate them, they it has very bad results, right? But if we give them Krishna conscious role models, then we can be assured that even though they may not be perfect, but yet because Krishna is part of the picture, the effect on them is a lot better. What to speak of the role models in Srimad Bhagavatam, role models like Dhruva or Prahlad Maharaj, they are in association with such great personalities. You know, the character of those great personalities rubs on these children. And as they get older, they actually imbibe those instructions from these great personalities, and they're able to appreciate their instructions. And we see that even just 50 years ago in India, influential people were sending their children to Gurukula. Now, Gurukula was only for 10 years, but they knew those 10 years were so crucial for their children to develop good character. And so, but now we see most of us are more, focusing on their academic achievements and their economic, future lives. In other words, we are more worried about their careers than giving them this basic instructions, these basic tools by which they can develop good character. Right? Prabhupada used to say that, education is not about teaching our children these four things that even animals are doing, right? Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. He said that for that, we don't need training. It's innate in us. Even a child, a baby doesn't need training how to eat. In other words, he'll take something that we give him, he'll put it in his mouth, and he won't put it anywhere else, right? The same thing with sleeping and defending and all these things. One doesn't need training, but what does need training is how to control these activities and use it in the service of Krishna. So, taking that in mind, we should, Prabhupada emphasized giving them these tools for developing good character. And why is good character? And there's so many ample examples in the scriptures by which we can teach them give them this facility for developing these good qualities, right? For example, the quality of tolerance. You know, we see in the Prahlad story how Prahlad was able to tolerate all the atrocities of his father, right? But Hiranyakashipu could not tolerate even a little bit of Prabhupada's, of Prahlad's preaching to him, right? He was so incensed with anger that he was ready to kill his own son. He was such a powerful personality, but he could not win over his little son, right? So this quality is best we see again and again, right? In the story of Jaya and Vijay, you know, where Krishna, when he comes to solve the conflict between the four sages and the Jaya and Vijay, then
Yeah, good bro. Special benefits should be. Then second slide again. First slide, role model. Then the should be present. Build character disposition. Appreciate their instructions. So for that,
so I've muted everybody for now, and then I'll unmute later on because of the disturbance here. So we see how uh, it's important to teach these children, right? For example, we see, I was talking about the Jay and Vijay story. You know, in that story, you know, Krishna makes the point to Jay and Vijay how important it was to to respect our superiors, right? But then, and also to the point that if they get angry or upset, the duty of the younger people are to actually pacify them rather than challenge them. It comes through so strongly in that story. And we see the mood of Jai and Vijay, how they follow that principle, you know? So just things like that, you know, Prabhupada said how it's today is a culture, such a bad culture because of this lack of these basic qualities in our children, how to respect authority, how to respect superiors, right? And this comes across through stories. Then it becomes easier to teach our children through these stories. If we were to give them the 10 commandments and tell them this is how you should live your life, they're not going to listen. But when it comes in the form of stories, then they quickly take that. They quickly imbibe that because it becomes in a very, very powerful way, you know? And just in Krishna's character, you know, when Krishna is punishing Kaliya, you know, he stops from killing him because of the intervention of his wives, right? But in the end, when when everything is done and Kaliya learns his lesson, and he tells Kaliya that you cannot actually stay in this water because you're poisonous, and I will not allow you to poison my lake. So, but you can go to your own island, the Ramanaka island, because you are the king of the snakes, right? King Krishna understood that he was a king and he needed to rule as a king. So instead of dealing with him with anger and disgust and making permanent enemies like we would generally do, right? If somebody um, hurt us, then he becomes an enemy for us all our life. But here we see Krishna, how he deals with him. He gives him the proper place of being continuing to be king, and this way he makes him eternally his friend, right, and his servant. And we see that, you know, everywhere. We see that when Krishna, you know, when he was on the planet and he was conquering all the demons, you know, Jarasandha and all these big demons, he made sure that their sons were in charge after that. So his quality of mercy and dignity that he would give to people, you know, how we are lacking in today's society, this human dignity, these human values, Krishna and his devotees, they show in such a amazing way. And that runs really, really deep in us and in our children, you know. Parikshit Maharaj, how he dealt with the personification of Kali, you know, how he after he surrendered, he gave him a place. And when he said that, well, these places are not even to be found here, then he gave him gold. He says, okay, you can live in gold. So we, in the character of all these great kings, we see that. We see this exemplary character. And we learn that. And this is so wonderful about learning good character from Vedic history, from all these great personalities, these great kings, you know, the exemplary behavior, you know, the exemplary behavior of Parikshit Maharaj, not only as the way he died, but also the way he lived. You know, the Pandavas, Yudhishthir Maharaj, you know, it is said that in Mahabharata, when Yudhishthira, right before the battle, when Yudhishthira Maharaj, he came to the other side, he walked all across the field without any weapons, and he took his obeisances one by one to all his seniors. And it is said that seeing his noble character, you know, all the soldiers were weeping. So we hear that. So when children hear these good examples, they want to be like that. They want to be like Dhruva. They want to be like Prahlad. And Prabhupada said that every child can be that. It's possible that every child can be a Dhruva and a Prahlad if we just simply give them Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is what how we're providing happiness for our children. This is what if we want our children to be happy, we must give them Srimad Bhagavatam, because these are the tools of becoming happy. Just materially, if we provide for them, that materialism in fact creates negative qualities. A child who's grown up simply in materialism, he's not going to be able to develop suddenly good qualities towards his parents or towards society. Because this is what he's learned. He's understood that the standard of enjoyment is materialism. And once they've understood that, then it's going to be very hard for them later on in life to appreciate spiritual culture. So, so we understand that um, that spiritually, this is the ultimate goal of reading Srimad Bhagavatam, is to give this spiritual knowledge to our children, to make them into ideal people. Okay, so now we go on to the academic benefits from reading Srimad Bhagavatam. So we know that ultimate goal for reading Srimad Bhagavatam with our children is to make them into great devotees, into pure devotees. But Srimad Bhagavatam can actually give beyond that. It can also give us skills for our children that is actually preparing them to how to become, to fit into this world. In other words, Srimad Bhagavatam is not only about Krishna and his pure devotees, but Srimad Bhagavatam also gives us the nature of this material world and how to live in it while going back to Godhead. So we know the practical part of their life is that they still need to be good, well educated. They need to have good jobs. They need to have all the tools to be ideal grahasthas, right? So my proposition here, through my experience, I want to share with you how Srimad Bhagavatam provides all these skills that today, in the world today, employers are looking for, right? What are employers looking for? Employers are looking for people with critical thinking and good reasoning skills, individuals who can take information, look at it critically, organize, separate, and then present it with their own realization. This is what the modern world is looking for. And also the educators in college, when we try to send our children to higher institutions for higher education, now they are looking for skills like that. Not gone are the days when children were expected as students to simply cram up things and to regurgitate them in the examinations. No. Now in schools today, teachers are teaching the younger children the concepts and the skills, knowing that later on in life, the facts will change, right? World is changing so fast. There's such an explosion of information that even few years down the line, the information is going to change. But what will remain are the skills and the tools that we have given our children to be able to take that knowledge and to organize it and to look at it critically and then present it with their own solutions, right? These are the skills that we employers will be looking for. These are the skills that educators are looking for, right? And Srimad Bhagavatam, it provides those skills, these strong critical skills of strong reasoning and critical thinking. Very clearly, it provides that. Because you take any story and how deeply one has to go. We are forced to go into it very deeply. And then according to our children's realizations, we can go through different layers of deep thinking, right? When the children are little, we go through just one layer maybe, and then we go deeper and deeper into it, right? Now, there's so many examples in that. For example, we see that in the story of Hiranyakashipu, the king of the demons, they, especially with this coronavirus situation, children are quite, at least in America, the children, I've talked to them, they're quite bewildered, where they don't know what to make out of it, you know. But you see, when we read Srimad Bhagavatam gives so much plenty of knowledge about these two types of people, right? Prabhupada talks about devotees or demigods and demons, right? So by giving us this knowledge, they understand that, okay, there are certain types of people in the world today who are not going to do things which, with the Ishavashya principle, in other words, keeping the God in the center. And what is the result of such behavior? Naturally, there's going to be commotion in the world. But yet, we see that how ultimately Krishna is the protector. So all these things come through in the story of Prahlad, for example, right? We see Hiranyakashipu, we see his bad character, we see his demoniac behavior, how he's behaving. He's promoting all kinds of horrible things, and we can see, and then we can talk about, what today's world is like and where is it coming from. When the children see it from that perspective, they say, okay, well, this is how life is, and this is, we're going to always encounter people like that who want to ruin this world. But yet we have Prahlad. We have Prahlad, you know. In other words, we have the spiritual side, which gives us so much hope, right? So when it's put into perspective like that, then children are able to take, and they are not so frustrated. They know the nature of this material world. They know the consequences of such nature, but yet they know the positive solution to that, right? Because Krishna is not going to tolerate such kind of behavior. And at some point, he's going to change that through the agency of his devotees, right? So in this way, children learn to analyze things rather than take it just like a story, a plot. Okay, this is the plot. Oh, there was this father and who behaved like this to his children, to his child. No, it's more than that. It goes deeper and deeper. Now, one thing wonderful about Srimad Bhagavatam also, it gives us good language skills, vocabulary. Prabhupada said in the quote earlier, I mentioned to you how it talked about, he talked about how children reading Srimad Bhagavatam, they can be masters and PhD. And I experienced that in my own life with my teaching Srimad Bhagavatam to my children. After 6 years, their English was on a master's level. And it just so happened by chance that they ended up in college very early in their life at the age of 12 or 13. And it just happened by accident. We were running a restaurant, a teacher who was a teacher in the university there, suggested that after hearing them speak, because once the children go through Srimad Bhagavatam, they start speaking very good English, And so he said, why don't you let them take one class from the university? And I said, there's absolutely no way. I mean, these are children and they are not adults. But then after he encouraged me, I said, why not? And then we got special permission. And my older one, he went and he took his first class. And it wasn't that difficult, because after his experience was, of course, he was very nervous, but the experience was that after going through these topics in such a deep way, even topics like Shakespeare and other classical writers, they are not very difficult to understand, because they've been trained to go how to see it, to go deep into it, and to find those finer points in those stories, and to question. So those skills were so valuable in their college life, and they actually did not have a problem. And also, Prabhupada said how Srimad Bhagavatam helps the children to understand every psychological situation in the world, talking about the age gap. Now, another worry was, well, the age gap was very big. So, but the thing is that when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, it provides a certain type of maturity in our children, emotional and psychological maturity, which helps them to actually relate with people of all ages very easily, and because it deals with so many adult topics, which is presented in such a way that children are able to digest it as well, if they read it with an adult and they get all the different perspective, right? So they are able to take that knowledge and put it in a perspective that they can easily relate with it, right? For example, there's so many stories there where we hear about, like, for example, the Dhruva story, right? We hear about Suruchi and how she behaves and her envy. And then we contrast it with Suniti's behavior. So all this is giving an insight into why people behave the way they behave, right? So they're learning how to deal with people and who are in the world today out there. They're really not living a sheltered life. Through the process of hearing, they are actually experiencing material life, but in a protected way. Material life is still presented to them in a very, very, stark way, with all its, horrible qualities, right? but yet is presented in a way that makes it, in a way that they are not part of it, right? So here they are hearing the truth, but in a protected way. Just like Prahlad Maharaj, while he was in the womb of his mother, he heard the highest spiritual knowledge, and he's a little child, and he's talking to his father all about the the nature of this material world, right? He's even telling his father that how he's becoming increasingly in demoniac because of his attachment, and he should leave home now because he's so attached, right? So in this way, the child, he's hearing about material life, but he's not experiencing it, right? So in this way, he can deal when he is going out into the world, then he can actually deal with it. And this is such a wonderful way of dealing with it, then exposing our children out there to deal with it, and that's in such a young age. Because many parents will argue that if you're protecting them in this way, then what will happen when they grow up and go out into the world? Well, my children also went out, at the age of 17. They went to England to study further, right? And so, but and then that time children are ready, because they can apply these principles that we have given them, and we're ready to leave them to be on their own, because we have given them the tools by which they can take whatever is in this material world and apply it in a way that is most beneficial for them. So the other thing that one we have to remember, that teaching them, many parents ask that if I teach Srimad Bhagavatam to my children, is it really practical? Will it really prepare them for future life? Will it, or is it just going to give them a career of being full-time devotees or maybe a pujari? Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but yet we have to understand that it's, it's not just that. It gives them the tools by which they can actually, be in any profession, and they will do that profession really, really well because of the tools and the skills we have given them. For example, in America, when somebody wants to be a lawyer, when a student wants to be a lawyer, one of the degrees that they're really looking for is a degree in philosophy. And the reason is not because of the content, what philosophy provides, Western philosophy or Eastern philosophy provides. What they're looking for is the tools that is needed to come to the skills that are needed to come to philosophical solutions, and these skills are very, very handy in the skills of studying law, So we can see, and Srimad Bhagavatam obviously gives those skills. And also, we have to understand that the material presented in Srimad Bhagavatam is not dogmatic. In other words, it doesn't tell us you do this and that's the end of it. If you don't do this, you're going to go to hell. No, it's giving us material in a way where we can rationalize, where we can reason, right? For example, Arjuna is to ask Krishna 3 times in 3 different places the same thing, because he hasn't understood. And he keeps asking Krishna, but I don't understand. What do you mean? Should I take sannyas or should I act in this world? So in this way, we see that knowledge from these Shastras, Srimad Bhagavatam, is giving the tools for children to use their brains, not to accept everything blindly, right? So that when they go out into the world, even in higher studies, and they have to deal with atheistic philosophy or impersonalist philosophy, they're not going to take it blindly, because they would have had it from their training. Same thing with Vedic science. How modern science is so atheistic, mechanistic. They want to leave God from the whole picture. But reading Srimad Bhagavatam, for example, the 3rd canto, in this where we talk about creation, we hear such amazing detailed explanation of the creation of this world, but ultimately how Mahavishnu is at the center of it all, how lower intelligence is coming from higher intelligence and not the other way around, right? What their philosophy is, that man is coming from lower, right? From lower intelligence, from microbes, from apes. But this is not possible because the cause must have all the qualities of the effect, right? So Krishna has to be the cause. The most intelligent person has to be cause. And then it's Brahma. He's the one who is designated by Krishna to create all these elements and the lower species, right? So all this comes very deep. And this is all in the Bhagavatam everywhere, not just the fifth canto, it's throughout the Bhagavatam. One gets such a convincing view of the origin of life. One gets such convincing view of creation, how Prabhupada refutes all these modern philosophies so successfully. The chemical evolution theory and all these things is throughout Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada discusses all this in the purports. And so children are, as they read, they become more and more convinced because it makes sense. Ultimately, it makes sense. Modern science theories, it may be very flashy, and that's why it appeals to the children in school, but yet it has no basis. It has no, it's not fulfilling. Okay, so now I'm going to take you through methodology for teaching Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is a very practical workshop where I'm going to take you through how to teach Srimad Bhagavatam through different age groups. But the basic principles are, first of all, that we sit in a circle if we are at home, or if it's in a bigger environment, like if you're teaching Sunday school with a bunch of children, we can all take turns reading only the translations. In other words, suppose we pick out a section of the Bhagavatam, for example, the Dhruva story, right, or the Prahlad story. Then we take turns reading only the translations. And the reason is because if we do the purpose, then children are very restless by nature. And very soon they will lose interest because the purpose may be very long and it's difficult for them to go through those purposes. So we just simply read the translations. And taking turns is also very effective because children tend to get distracted. So when their turn comes to read these translations, then they start, they again become attentive because it's their turn coming, right? Children love to read. One of the things is children love to read. I have, phone classes, or online classes for children, uh, and even teenage children and older. If I miss out their turn in reading, they always remind me. They say, well, you forgot me, Mataji, you forgot to call out my name. This is how they get attached to reading. So it helps them to focus. It helps them to get less distracted, right? So we take turns. Now, if the parents can read the purpose ahead of time, that is wonderful. Then you can note the points on the side, uh, some of the points that uh, you would like to share, right? You would like to convey, to make it into a discussion, because then it becomes like a reminder, right? I can start this point of discussion. So if you have the time, now you don't have to go through every purport. Now, if you don't have the time, it's okay. You can still read with them because, like I said earlier, as adults, we have experience of life, right? We know we can give them a lot more insight than what they actually have. Okay. Now, talking about discussion is actually the heart of the whole methodology. Is discussion. Why? Because it opens up the mind of the children. It breaks up the monotony of reading. It makes children think and reason, and they get a chance to communicate. They express their opinion, so it helps with the communication, and ultimately, it gives a chance for us all to reflect on these stories and to give our own and to give for them to give their realizations at the end of the session, right? And it's such a amazing time where children, because they are participating in the discussion, they feel they're actively involved in it. And they don't have a tendency to get bored or distracted in this way. Okay. So this process of discussion is a very powerful process. For example, we see the whole Bhagavatam was a discussion among sages, right? And this used to be the norm of teaching in just 50 years ago, even in America, it was like that. But now we have a monologue in schools where the teacher simply speaks and the children listen. And that makes it very, children lose interest, right? Even today in England, in Oxford and Cambridge, they have the tutorial system, the system of discussion, a teacher with a few students. And it's very, very powerful. It's very, very effective. So discussion is actually the heart of this whole process because it takes us, it helps our children, it actually helps them sharpen their intelligence. And if there was any success in our homeschooling, I would give a lot of credit to this area of discussion. Very, very important to do that because pretty much all the language arts is taken care of in this process. The ability to develop language skills through discussion, speaking, communication. And then we would also do devil's advocate, where we would take, we would take different sides. For example, one side could be, oh, I don't believe in the soul. And the other one could be, I believe in the soul. And so when in the story, when we come to some kind of discussion like that, and we get enough information from the pulpit, then we can give the children, the tools to be on one side, right? And this makes it very, very exciting and animated, right? Even small children, they love a challenge, right? I know small children, young children, like as old as 9 and 10, they want to discuss they want to debate, and they're waiting. I mean, areas of Bhagavatam one would think it's so boring. They are looking forward to those areas. Why? Because they can debate. For example, they want to be Mayavadis, while the other one wants to be a devotee, right? So even topics which seemingly look so boring, it becomes exciting for them. And it's not difficult to start the discussion at their level of understanding, right? Just some information, some background information from Srila Prabhupada's purpose is enough to give them the right tools, right, for discussion. And as they get older, these discussion gets deeper and deeper. I remember we were doing the story about Hiranyakashipu, he was, preaching, how Hiranyakashipu was preaching to his relatives after the death of his brother Hiranyaksha. His mother was lamenting, his wife was lamenting, and all his nephews were lamenting naturally. So he's preaching to them. And then he gives the story about these queens who are crying over the body of their dead king, husband. And then Yamaraj comes to preach to them so that they can allow the body to be cremated. And we went into such deep discussion. And these were children, these were just between 9 and 12, 14, like that. And we went into such a deep, open discussion about, the soul and the body, how even in a dead body, all the elements are there, but what is missing. So when Yamaraj is saying that you actually never knew your husband, he's still there lying with all his regalia, all his ornaments, but did you actually know him? Because he's still here. So what, you actually didn't know the real husband because he's not here, anymore. So in this way he explains, and then he talks about and Prabhupada in his pulpit talks about how the soul, if he hovers as a ghost, if he's very attached to his body, and therefore cremation provides such a nice way for the soul to become detached and go into the next body. Now it sounds so heavy, but the children are really, they really opened up and they were thinking about this thing, and they became very, very excited just to know these things, because really knowledge about these things actually gives hope, gives positiveness, because we can see because the nature of this world is birth, death, old age, and disease. These are facts of life, right? But to see it in this perspective takes away the fear. We understand that, okay, well, this is how it is. We are not actually this body, we are the soul, right? And it takes away that fear in our children when they don't know what's going to happen to them, what's going to happen to the parents. They take a very, very pragmatic perspective, and they gradually learn the value of human life, because we always end up discussing that, how important the positive side is. So important to leave this positive side with our children, where even when we are discussing topics like that, we understand how ultimately the journey of a devotee, from this world, what is that compared to the journey of a sinful person, is very, very different, right? It's not that. And we get that in another story, right? The journey of Dhruva Maharaj when he's going back to Godhead. Surely that was not horrific. It was so beautiful, right? So we get these comparisons, these contrasts by which the child can place it into proper perspective. And during discussion, we bring these comparisons together. That look, okay, it's like this, but this is not the journey of a devotee of the Lord. A devotee of the Lord is Krishna practically comes and takes him away. Okay. So in this way, we give the right perspective to the children. And so this is the benefit of a good discussion with our children. Okay. So in the end, we summarize by allowing the children to give their realization. And that's, like I said, is the most exciting part for them. I know groups that I've done where children have told me, for example, we were doing the Dhruva story. They told me that, I've read Dhruva story so many times, but I've never seen it like that. And it's amazing, even I feel it. I've been doing these for so many years, but each time I read these stories, I feel like I've entered practically a new area that I hadn't covered before. And I have more and more questions and realizations that I can give them. And each of my classes that I do, they become different, right? Because there's so much there, and the children are experiencing the same thing. They're amazed. One child told me that how, wow, my mind is going to explode the way it goes through different layers. It's just like so many layers, this and that. Like example, we were doing Jayan Vijay story. So we took sides. Okay, were the Jayan Vijay right or the sages were right? And why? And giving the different opinions. And then Krishna comes. And then Krishna deals with, how he becomes a person who solves the conflict. He's so expert in solving conflicts, right? And he leaves everyone so satisfied to the point that even though he's telling his confidential associates that you made an offense towards these brahmanas, that you shouldn't have done, but yet he's explaining to the sages that my devotees are so dear, leaving them with this feeling that, oh, I shouldn't have done that. See how dear the devotees are to Krishna. We should never consider a devotee of the Lord to be, we should never curse them, because they are always sadhus, even if they fall down. Why? Because their objective is to please Krishna. Okay. So in this way, they come away feeling totally humble and feeling at fault, and they're asking Krishna to punish them, give them some punishment. So how Krishna deals with different people in different situations is so nicely described in so many different stories. So the children learn how to how to solve conflicts, and how to take things in a way where we don't make enemies, but rather to see everybody with the eye of compassion. Okay. So now I'm going to tell you how to teach Bhagavatam for younger kids. And basically, it's showing them nice pictures in Prabhupada's books. You know how Prabhupada's Bhagavatam books, they come in such wonderful, nice pictures, and the children, very young, they like to see those pictures, and you can point out to them different features in that picture. For example, Krishna's peacock feather or a flute. How he's playing the flute, and different items in that picture, and you can show them again and again. And it's amazing how they never get tired of that. They will ask you to show those same pictures again and again. And of course, you can tell them the story again and again. There's a group in England that got really inspired with this, and they started a group called the Baby Bhagavatam group, where they were meeting once a week and doing Bhagavatam, presenting the Bhagavatam with these younger kids between 2 and 5 years old, like that. And in a way that made it very, very entertaining for them. Now, they started out with Canto 1 and Chapter 1, right? So I have a little audio recording that I would like to share with you that one mother made, and made it so creative, just to give you an idea with with Canto 1, Chapter 1.
Oh my goodness, where are we? Can you hear that, Lally? Where are we?
We're in the forest, Namisaranya.
The forest of Naimisharanya. Oh wow, it's so beautiful here. What can you see?
Chirping birds.
You can see chirping
And
birds.
loads and loads of trees.
Loads of trees, yes. And look, Lally, can you see? There's so many sages.
And the sweet family.
Yes. Yes, you're right.
There he is.
There he is, yes. Oh my gosh, there's many great sages. They've all gathered together to perform a sacrifice for 1,000 years, just because they want to please.
Lord Krishna and his devotees.
Yes, they want to please Lord Krishna and his devotees. And who did you say was the leader? Where's the leader?
Sita Goswami over there.
Oh yes, he's over there. Hare Krishna, Sita Goswami.
Hare Krishna, Sita Goswami.
Oh my goodness. The other sages, they're very respectful towards him. Can you see that? Oh my goodness. I wonder why. Why are they so respectful towards him?
Because he's the tallest.
Or the oldest?
Oldest, I think.
Oh, I see.
And he knows all the scriptures.
Really? Wow. So he's the oldest out of all the sages, and he knows all the scriptures in all the world.
And he always listened to his spiritual master, so his spiritual master blessed him.
Oh, right. I see. Because he was very good and he listened to his spiritual master. His spiritual master was very pleased with him. His teacher was very pleased, and he lifted up his right hand and he blessed Sutta Goswami. And you know what? Sutta Goswami had loads of friends, and all his friends were learned sages as well. Did you know that? And you know, whoever your friends are, you become like that. And because all his other friends were learned sages, he was also a learned sage too. This is very interesting. Wow. Nice to meet you, Sutta Goswami, and nice to meet you, lovely sages all gathered together. I think. Should we see what they're about to do? Somebody else that we're forgetting. Who is it?
So I hope you all enjoyed that. That was, I thought, was very cute. And then we talk about the older children between this age of 4 and 7. Now, they're just barely learning how to read, right? So they may not know how to read the translations. So what we can do is we can read to them, right? We can read to them. But directly from Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, we should read the translations to them, and then we can stop to explain nicely, better, with good expressions, what's going on with the story. And then we can also open it for discussion with them. And some of these questions could be just factuals or even challenging questions. Okay, sorry, there was something. So in this way, okay, sorry. So now with children that young, many parents have challenges because they cannot sit still, right? So a nice way that I was doing it was when we give our children some things to where they can keep themselves busy. For example, some coloring, where they can keep busy with their hands, and because children are generally restless by nature, then they can hear. So in other words, while they're coloring, they're able to hear nicely. Or we can give them some soft toys where they are playing with toys that's not making too much noise. In this way, the children's minds are being occupied in this way, but they are listening. And it's amazing how much a child at that age will listen. You think they're not listening, but they're listening, because as soon as you start a discussion and you ask them certain questions, they are ready with an answer. So this is how we can curb their restless nature, by allowing them to be doing things in the room, but at the same time, they're quiet and they're hearing. Okay, so that's one of a little tip there to deal with children that age. And it's amazing how much they will take. Now, I remember I was teaching my grandson for some time over Skype, and Srimad Bhagavatam, and we came to that Dhruva story, the part where the airplane, comes down to take Dhruva back to Godhead, at the end of his 36,000 years when he was ready. And there's a beautiful description about the airplanes, as you may remember. You may have read that story. And the Vishnu Dutas, Nanda and Sunanda, was looking very, very, they were described as looking very beautiful. And the airplane was decorated very beautifully. And so he told me, Dadi, I want to go in that plane right now, back to Godhead. And then I was smiling, thinking, oh, how enthusiastic he is. And I said, okay, that's okay. He said, no, but I would really want to go now. And I said, okay, now think about it. If you want to go now, then you'll have to leave your parents behind. And he thought for a moment and he said, well, I'm going to wait because I don't want to make the same mistake as Ajamal did. And if you've read the story of Ajamal, you may remember that after Ajamal fell down with a prostitute, he was a good, nice Brahmana, married, and then he got attracted to a prostitute and he brought her home, left his chaste wife, and he fell down and did all kinds of sinful things. And when he was 88 years old and he was dying on his deathbed, then these Yamadutas came to take him to Yamaraj and punish him because he had done so many sinful things. And Ajamal, out of fear, he called out the name of his son. He wasn't thinking about the Lord, but he was thinking he was afraid and called out his son, whom he was very, very attached to. But yet, by the power of the holy name, he was saved from going with Yamadutas, and he got another chance, and he perfected his life. And with this another chance, when he perfected his life, he started regretting, his mistake, and he started regretting especially how he had neglected his old parents, and lamenting on that. So he remembered that and he said, well, I don't want to do that. I want to take care of my parents. Now that quality is very difficult to actually teach our children, right? The quality of gratefulness. If you were to tell the child, oh, you should be grateful to all that I've done, it doesn't go very deep, right? We all know that, right? It doesn't go very deep. But if it's presented in this way, in such a wonderful way, through this example of Dhruva Maharaj, it's very, very powerful. And now what I was talking, actually, I forgot to mention, was Dhruva's quality of gratefulness. When he's going back to Godhead, he refuses to get up on the plane until his mother is also there, is going with him. And the Nanda and Sunanda pointed out to the airplane above him, saying that she's already going, even earlier than, with you. So that Prabhupada explains how Dhruva was so grateful for his mother's direction. And now that interchange between his mother and him lasted a few minutes, where she directed him the right way, right? So she saw him, as a guru, and wanted to repay that debt. 36,000 years, even 36,000 years later, he did not forget. So that quality of gratefulness comes so clearly through stories, rather than we're trying to teach our children through just theoretically, So in this way, even a young child like this can be, we can give them these tools, these, inculcate in them these qualities so easily, effortlessly. I remember going to a school, to convent in India, and how the first class that we had was moral science class. And it's all about these things that we should do or should not do. And I remember it was one of those classes where all the children were constantly thinking, when am I going to get out of it, right? It didn't go very deep. But yet, when we read it through Srimad Bhagavatam, they go really, really deep in our hearts. And then, of course, children, even that age, they ask a lot of challenging questions, I remember how we were discussing things like, is Vritasura a demon or a devotee? Is Bali Maharaj a demon or a devotee? We're talking about aspects like that, how one should not judge anybody just by their birth, but by quality. You know, and then so they do get they get quite deep into it because they've been given the right tools. They've been trained to think like that, right? To analyze things. Then we have the next age group, which is older age group, and it gets slightly more deeper. The tools are the same, the process methodology is the same, except the questions become less factual, and there's more why and hows. There's more comparisons, there's more debates, there's more discussions, and which go through many, many layers like that. And so, and also there's a lot of, you know, places where we want to relate it with the world around there. We have to be careful and not put them on a spot. For example, we don't try to say that, okay, well, you, Dhruva behaved like that, but you remember how you behaved that day, you're so ungrateful to me. Or so in this way, we don't point fingers because this is not how we want to present Srimad Bhagavatam to them, and this is not how we want to see them to feel, right? The point is that we simply go deep into the story and the effect will automatically be there without putting them in that spot, right? Sometimes practical things are okay, like things that's happening in your life in the temple. Maybe there's a case where a devotee has done something which clearly shows it's not right or something. Sometimes it becomes a great avenue to discuss that from the light of the scriptures and how to see it with compassion, because scriptures have so many examples of that. It's all about the fall downs, but yet how Krishna keeps pulling people up and up again, right? It's all about Srimad Bhagavatam is full of stories of different people falling down, but yet it doesn't end there. It's all about how to bring them up, how to push them up again, right? So when we see it in light of these stories, it becomes an avenue for discussion in a very positive way. So in that sense, it can be practical, very practical, and also practical in the sense of world situations, like I mentioned earlier, the things that's happening today, how to see it in that light. And also to see it's okay to talk about materialists and the consequences, all these things, because we want them to understand the value of spiritual life and the value of their being a devotee and how fortunate they are. So in this way, we get deeper and deeper into that story. And there were some stories that went, like for younger children, for example, if you have an age group which is only like 5 to 10 or something like that, then you could discuss things that, for example, I remember talking about in the last story about what is real, when Hiranyakashipu was crying, when, out of affection, when Prahlad came back from school and he asked him very affectionately, what did you learn in school? So at one point, the tears were coming down from his face on the head of Prahlad. And so I raised a question like, well, he's crying, he's got affection for his son. So isn't that real love? But yet we see how he was ready to kill his son. Just a little bit later, he's ready to kill him, and he's thinking that he's his enemy, right? So how do we put the two together? So we had a very big discussion on what is real love. And they were coming up with all kinds of answers, and it became such a wonderful discussion. And then we ultimately came to that point that ultimately real love is unconditional love, which has no selfishness in it. That can be only real love, right? The way Krishna loves us, there's no conditions attached to it. Now, Hiranyakashipu's love for his child was conditional, was selfish. Right? So it cannot be real love. So we can have real love for each other, if we put Krishna in the center. Right? Just like we love our father, we will naturally love our siblings, our brothers and sisters. Right? So in this way, we're just going deeper and deeper into what is real love. And they understood that real love can only be there when Krishna is part of the picture. Otherwise, it just ends up being selfish love. What can I get from you and what can you give me? Right? And this is what material life is all about. So it became a very a simple level for younger children and also for older children to think about, right? So simple things like that we can take from the story and make it into something wonderful, something very deep. Yeah. And just even things, topics like becomes, many parents ask about, adult topics in the Srimad Bhagavatam. How do we deal with that? And Srimad Bhagavatam has plenty of that, right? So many areas of Srimad Bhagavatam that becomes quite embarrassing to read with the children. But actually, my experience has been that it's never hurts. In other words, it's all beneficial. Why? Because Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental. In other words, topics such as adult topics about sex and violence, all these topics, the children will pick up anyway from the world out there. You cannot avoid it anymore. Gone are the days where we can live a completely sheltered life. They will pick it up, whether they pick it up from their friends or through the internet or wherever. They will pick up these things. So the best way for them to understand these topics is through Srimad Bhagavatam, because Srimad Bhagavatam gives a perspective which is totally different. In other words, it's not put down upon. It is presented in a way that when these very things are used in the service of Krishna, it becomes very wonderful, right? Very, very wonderful. And there's ample examples in the scriptures. The story of progenitors such as Daksha and Kashyapa Muni. They created thousands of children for a good purpose, right? And then we have stories like Puranjan and Diti's story, that when sex is used improperly for sense gratification, what is the result? Puranjan, there's so much discussion of this lustful relationship between Puranjan and his wife, but yet we see the consequences in that relationship. Very soon the soldiers of time overtook them and there was much suffering, right? So in this way, the children understand the good side and bad side of sex life, right? When it's used for, what is the result when it's used for sense gratification? What is the result when it's used for pleasing Krishna, for creating children who can become wonderful devotees in the world? Okay. So in this way, when children grow up and they have to deal with the world, especially in the West, there's so much, so much, immorally, things are so degraded, right? It's very, very important for children to put a perspective on these things. And when they're given this kind of training, such children will never go out into the world and do the wrong things, because they've learned how to deal with this in a proper way, right? And topics like that. For example, we were doing the third canto and the story of Kardam Muni and Devahuti. It gives the perspective of good grahastha life. How the same tendency, the same attraction between man and woman, which they can see. I mean, they're living in a family, with parents. There's a mother and there's a father, right? So this perspective, they see it, they're in it, and then they see it in the world out there, especially in the West. There's so much out there, right? Which enhances that, how the whole world is built around this attraction between man and woman. But if it's put in a perspective where this same attraction can be used in a way that's pleasing Krishna, they accept it. They don't accept it in a negative way, but rather they accept it in a positive way, right? So the story of Kardamuni and Devahuti is one such example, a good couple, an ideal couple, and how both of them exemplified very good qualities, right? Of course, we have to place it according to time, place, and circumstance. And Prabhupada talks about that in the purpose. So we get all that, how to place it according to time. But yet the principles are there for us to follow, right? So how Kardam Muni was, he was giving the qualities of an ideal husband, of protection, gratefulness, treating each other with respect, right? And this is because of proper training. And in the earlier chapter, in the earlier section, Prabhupada is talking about good training for young girls and for young boys, right? That comes through. And so many opportunities comes where we can give these children through these examples of good training, the Varna Ashram. I mean, it comes again and again, how at different stages of life and how to live properly in that stage of life, the student stage, how to live properly in that stage of life. And then we were openly discussing about, why, there's no intimate association between girl and boy. This is a very big point here in the West, because it's everywhere, right? How to teach our children the importance of understanding that. And it comes so well through stories like Devahutin Kadamuni, where Prabhupada walks us through these points, how important it is to be chaste to each other and to wait till one is married. So in this way, we are not sheltering our children on these topics. We are openly discussing with them, because this is what they're going to face in society today. And we are arming them. We are giving them the tools by which they can, by which they can live a happy life. Because Prabhupada says that material life can be happy if we live by these principles, right? Even though material life is a place where we want to eventually get out, but yet it can, while living in this world, how we can live in a way that can please Krishna and make ourselves happy, right? And Bhagavatam provides all these tools. We were also openly discussing about, things like, again and again in every story we hear about how great kings were leaving home, and that becomes a great point for our children. They become very fearful. What does it mean? My father is going to leave me, and things like that. And it provides such a nice avenue to discuss this whole process. That, well, it's not necessary. They may not want to leave, but yet the process of detachment is so nice. It's so wonderful, right? And how it comes so effortlessly. It's not and through examples they can learn much easily, and how the ultimate goal of life can be presented. These are serious topics, but actually, when you present it in a nice way, it actually becomes such a fun thing. I've had experience where children who are just 9 years old and 10 years old, they enjoy these deep, heavy topics. They just enjoy it because there's a side of us in our psyche where we want things to hear things about that. For example, violence that's presented in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a side in us that wants to hear about these gory things, right? These violent things. But so when it's presented in Srimad Bhagavatam, these violent things, for example, Hiranyakashipu, Nrsingadev, taking out all the intestines of Hiranyakashipu and wearing it as a garland, it seems so gross to the outside eye, but yet it's wonderful for our children, because they see how Krishna is a hero and how he can kill, right? And because ultimately Krishna is doing it for the benefit. How violence is used to curb violence, to stop violence. Here in material life, violence is used to promote more violence. Nobody knows who's shooting and why they're shooting, who's killing and why they're killing. It's all done for sense gratification. It's a power game, right? But in Srimad Bhagavatam, when violence is committed, it's done for a purpose. Krishna himself is sanctioning it. He's himself allowing the kings to use violence against those who are being bad, right? So it's put in proper perspective. So nothing, even gory details like that, children are okay with it. They will not apply it in their own life. They will not apply that because it's presented in a proper way. It's Krishna who does it. And it's those who Krishna authorizes who do it, right? In Krishna book, Krishna is the one who's killing all the demons. Mother Yashoda is not doing anything. Nand Maharaj is not doing anything. So ultimately, the children get the point that Krishna is our ultimate protector. I don't have to worry. Krishna will protect me. Okay. So in this way, we can go deeper and deeper with this age group, where they actually, you can see the change. I've had children who've been with me for several years now, and I see the change in them. They become very, very, they develop so many wonderful qualities, and they learn to think deep. They learn to put philosophy in their life. They become reflective. They become very compassionate to others. Because that's one of the things we learn from practically every story, this element of compassion towards others, those who are suffering in this world.
Yes, because
so I have just one other thing to present to you. Maybe one example here that I wrote in this slide. The example of the Dhruva story is one of those wonderful stories to start with. Now, one question could be that many parents ask me is, should I start from the beginning or should I start from any story? So my answer to that is that my experience has been that when children have not been exposed to Srimad Bhagavatam so much, then start with the story. Pick out one story like Dhruva Maharaj and do those 5 chapters. And then after, when they've developed enough attraction, and these stories are not any less deep than first canto or second canto, they're very, very deep. And when their hearts are attracted to Srimad Bhagavatam, then you can go back and start from canto 1 in chapter 1. And again, we have to remember just the translations. And if you want to go really deep, then read the purpose ahead of time, make those points, and present it in a way which is very, very fun and very, very engaging, right? And yet, they're getting hang of the philosophy. So in this way, Dhruva's story is a great story to start with, because all of you know that it's a simple story where Dhruva, King Uttanapad has 2 queens, Suruchi and Suniti, and Dhruva is the son of the queen that is not favored by the king. And so one day he was trying to get on the lap of his father, and his mother, his stepmother, Suruchi, became very, very proud because she was the favorite queen. She said some very, very harsh words to Dhruva and told him that really he can never sit on the lap or even be on the throne because he's not born from her womb. And then in order to do that, in order to be born from her womb, he needs to go and please Lord Vishnu. Well, that was really nice advice she gave, right? And of course, Dhruva was very, very hurt. He was a Kshatriya by nature, and he felt very, very angry, revengeful. He went to his mother crying. And how did his mother direct him? She was very unlike Suniti, right? Now, her quality was, she in fact advised him in a different way. He said, well, she's saying the right thing. And she says, one of the things you have to remember, Dhruva, is that don't be envious of others. Now, she is saying something totally different from Suruchi, right? What a contrast. She's saying, don't be envious of others. Because if you wish ill for somebody, you'll get that same for yourself. You'll suffer yourself first, right? And then on top of that, she tells him to go to Krishna. She says, leave home and you can find Krishna and find him and please him if you want your material desires to be fulfilled. She understood that he had material desires, very, very big desires. And they can be only fulfilled by somebody who's more than what she is. He says, Krishna is like millions of mothers. He can satisfy all your desires. So what did Suniti do? She changed a very unfortunate situation and she made it very fortunate. And I remember discussing that at great length with the group of children I had, that how any situation that we have in life, we can make it into such a wonderful thing if we see it as coming from Krishna, right? She took something very unfortunate and she made it so fortunate. Why? Because of her chastity to Krishna. In her misery, when Dhruva left, she never forgot Krishna. Dhruva never forgot Krishna. His focus was, I want to find Krishna. And through honest means, I want to get what I want. In other words, we learn from the story, it's okay to have material desires, but we must go to Krishna for fulfillment of these desires, not to any other person. Because ultimately, Krishna will purify my desires and he will also fulfill whatever he thinks best, right? So we learn many, many lessons. And then, So for the older children, we went a lot deeper. For example, we heard about Suniti, how even though she was neglected by her husband, but she became so glorious, right? Because of her ultimate chastity to Krishna. At any point in her life, she never forgot Krishna. And that was the main thing that comes through in the story, is that she was glorified because she led her child to the right path. She found a spiritual solution. Of course, sometimes the material solutions, we do have to find some solutions materially, but yet we know the ultimate solution is Krishna. If Krishna wants something, it's going to happen, right? So we learn to depend on Krishna. Children learn through these stories how ultimately Krishna is the ultimate protector, right? So in this way, we can take every story in Srimad Bhagavatam and go through them. So I'm going to pretty much end here. Just some questions that parents can ask me, and I think I've already covered the ones here. And then I just want to share to you as my last slide, and that is, I have certain resources that you can take advantage of. For example, I have the book called Homeschooling Krishna's Children. Even though it talks about it says homeschooling, yet the subject matter is applicable to anybody who's raising a child or who plans to raise a child, because I talk about how to set up the home environment in a way that it enhances children's spiritual life. I talk in length about how to teach Srimad Bhagavatam to our children, and also how to encourage them to reach out to others, preaching activities. So, and then we also, with the help of many, many wonderful parents and devotees around the world, we are now compiling, we're putting together a series of books which are like guidebooks for every canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And these are these explain, after you've done this process of discussion with your children or with your students, then you go to these books and you read the summary. There's a summary, and then there's questions, that you can use for discussion, as well as for your own discussion. And then we have different activities which help to understand the philosophy or the points, the themes in the chapter. Many wonderful activities such as critical thinking activities, analogy activities, introspective activities, drama activities, fun things like art projects, word searches, and many such things, and all of them are aimed at understanding the subject matter, but in a fun way. So this work that we are compiling is coming after many, many hours of hard work, and people are contributing towards this, this transcendental project. So these books are available now, the first 3 cantos, and if you are interested, you can get in touch with me, or maybe one devotee in your yatra who can collectively take requests, and I can arrange it through avenues. There's a publisher, in Mayapur it's available, and they can send it to you from there, like that. So here I end my presentation to you. I took longer than what I was expecting. So now I would like to open it for questions from participants, which Hare Krishna, Zana? Hare Krishna? Hare Krishna?
Hare Krishna Mataji. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself.
Oh,
I had
that's
to
okay.
leave a message for you.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Arudha Mataji, for giving us your valuable time and for hosting this workshop, which gives us deep understanding on the importance of reading Srimad Bhagavatam to our children. It was a very insightful session for me, and I'm sure it's the same with every one of us. So with deep gratitude that I hold in my heart for you, Mataji, I want to thank you on behalf of everyone for sharing your personal experiences with us today. And we look forward to work collectively and raise good character Krishna conscious kids. And we also look forward for more of these types of learnings through your future seminars, online courses, and most importantly, through your books. So thank you very much, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Now, yes, Prabhuji. So I would.
Yes, thank you very much, Arudha Mataji. for your wonderful seminars.
Thank you.
Actually, we live in France.
Hare Krishna.
This is my son. His name is Haritoshan. We live in France, so I'd like to order the last three books of your Srimad Bhagavatam series.
Hare Krishna.
So, Prabhu, so if you can take my email ID and then you
Yeah,
can.
I did.
Yeah, yeah. So please write to me, and I will connect you to the right place. Yes.
Okay, I'll do that, Mataji. Thanks a lot. It's
Yes.
really valuable.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you. Thank you for appreciating. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Great. Hare
Share the
Krishna.
screen.
So I would like now to also thank our participants for today's workshop. And we would encourage everyone to kindly post your questions on the WhatsApp group. So far, we've received a couple of questions. So I'd like to address them to Mataji as and when received. Mataji, should we begin?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so we have a first question from Taruni Gopi Mataji. She's saying she's got a daughter of 1.5-year-old, and she tells us stories from Bhagavatam. But how will it help her in future? She has a question.
Well, these impressions go very deep. So in other words, it's not like if you're giving her now, she's going to forget everything later. So you keep on giving that instruction to her all her life, as long as she's with you. So yeah, this is a continuous thing. It's not something that we just stop after some time. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji. Our second question we have is from Danika Mataji. She writes, I would like to know how to cover the verses and purport in the way a child of even a 5-year-old can understand. Also, how to help them to remember so many personalities of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes. Now, like I mentioned earlier, and I made that point again and again, that we don't want to read purports with them. We want to read purports on our own, we can in our own quiet time, if we have the time. Otherwise, you can just do translations with them as they read. But if you can do purports, you can read ahead of time, but they will only read translations. Now, a 5-year-old cannot even read very well. So you read to them, and I just explained that process of reading to them and then opening it for discussions and explaining it in a very animated and nice way, exciting way, because he's very young, and even they can engage their bodies in a way where they stay quiet while they hear. So there's different techniques where we can get them to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mataji. We have a question, I believe it's from Vraja Mandali Mataji. She writes that how do we discuss tough topics with a little kid of 4 to 5 years, like what is the death, a Jamil and the prostitute story, etc.
Yes, yes, yeah. So like I said, everybody has. So everybody, please mute yourself. Okay, mute yourself till you need to speak. Everyone, please do that. Okay, thank you. So, so for example, the story of Ajamil, it has, description of when he sees the prostitute in the forest, right? So it's a little bit difficult, but reading through that is okay, because they're quite innocent. They're not looking for very detailed answers in those areas. In other words, you just move on, but yet you explain to them that what he was doing, what he was experiencing and seeing the prostitute, having illicit relationship with a man, was wrong, because proper relationship is when man and woman get married, just like your mommy and papa, they get married and they live in a family, in a house. That's proper, decent way to live, not the way this prostitute was dealing with another man who was not her married husband and her married wife. So clearly they can see that this is wrong. There's nothing wrong with explaining that, because the whole world they're going to see that everywhere, at least in the West, we see that everywhere. So No, these topics are openly to be discussed, but not the details. And the child is not even looking for details, because you will find yourself easily overlooking all those details. And very soon, as the child gets even older, they know that, well, this is something we're not going to discuss, even if he was curious, right? So the details we avoid, but yet, and the Bhagavatam is not going into so much detail either. What it's talking about is just, relationship with, which is irreligious, right? So I would, yeah, so why not? Because it's a very engaging story. It's a very nice story. It may seem that it's a little fearful when Yamadutas come, but children love stories like that, because they are not thinking they're going to be the ones, with Yamaraj over them. Because with that perspective, we can give them. We can say, well, look at when Vishnu Dutas were there too. Okay, Vishnu Dutas were there too, right? Dhruva's story is there. So you start making comparisons, right? So the point is that the other, Mataji had that question that how many things are they going to remember? Well, we are not trying to cram all this in them. Okay, we're not trying to cram it, all this. So what I can do, Zarna, is I can mute everybody, and when you need to give me that question, you can unmute yourself. Would that work, Zarna?
It wouldn't allow me to unmute myself if you mute all. That's just a little glitch I've discovered.
Okay. Well, okay. Unfortunately, okay. That's okay. Then, okay. So in this way, yes, Rajamandali, we can even do that story with our children. Okay. It's very important to give that perspective.
Great. And just to
Go ahead.
So we have Kavi Rupa Radhika Devi Mataji also asking similar sort of a question, but she's saying, how do we explain that Draupadi, is a wife of 5 Pandavas, and Arjun married another, wife, Subhadra? How do we explain that as well?
Yeah. So again, this, first of all, we have to explain that Draupadi was not ordinary personality, and nobody, a woman cannot, it's not possible for her in this time and age to have 5 husbands. So she was very, very unique in what she did, right? And we can discuss things like, how, for example, how you were talking, you just asked about the people, how they had the Kshatriyas, they had so many wives. Well, Kshatriyas were allowed to have many, many wives. Why? Because they were capable of maintaining them. Every time they would conquer a kingdom, the king who was conquered would give their daughter in marriage, and that way it would solidify the relationship between the two kingdoms, right? So it was a way to solidify the relationship. Also, these were great personalities. They were not ordinary, and they had the capacity to maintain all of their wives, no matter how many wives they had, right? So it did not degrade them. That's the point. The reason is because, see, today the reason why polygamy is banned is because it is not done in a proper way, right? And instead, men are having illicit relationship with so many women, and then they're discarding them, right? So when you think about it, is that better? People are doing prostitution. Even though they have their married wife or something, they still go out and they have other illicit relationship, or they may not marry, but they have like illicit relationship with so many, right? And then they leave them with children. The women sometimes have children, they get pregnant. And so what is that? And that's total irresponsible behavior, where so, but in Vedic culture, if men wanted to have more than one wife, well, they were totally capable of maintaining and satisfying all of them, right? And this way immorality was controlled, right? So of course this is not allowed in Kali Yuga, because it just doesn't work now. Men get totally degraded. So it's not recommended. It's recommended that one simply have one wife and one husband and be satisfied in their relationship, right? So in this way, Prabhupada explains all this in the pulpit, you see, and that way we get so much conviction that whatever was happening in the Vedic culture was so correct. There's nothing wrong. It is perfect, right? It's the people who make it imperfect. The caste system was perfect, But yet, as time degraded, it became imperfect. Not what Krishna made it to be, right? So in this way, we can explain to the children, that this was allowed for the Kshatriyas because they were very capable of maintaining all these women, and in a very nice way. They weren't using them or disrespecting them. We see so much respect for between queens and kings, right? It wasn't a situation where they were treating them like slaves or taking advantage of them. That's degraded.
And even anyway, Draupadi was born from the fire sacrifice. She was not a human lady.
Yes, good point, Prabhu. Yes, she was not even, she was exalted in every way.
Thank you, Mataji.
What is this WhatsApp chat, Zana Mataji, on this? I'd like to be part of it.
Yes, Prabhuji, you can write to me. I think you have my number. If you can write to me personally about the questions, we'll address those to Mataji step by step.
Okay, so I have your WhatsApp. I can see now. Okay, great.
Yes,
Thank you.
You've got that. Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, the next question we have is from Kavita Mataji. She's just asking, how can we make chanting interesting for the kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, chanting is japa is one of those things which children don't take to it very easily. So we have to present it in a way where they really get attracted to it and they like it. And the best way is to chant with them. When we chant with them, even if they're chanting 1 round, 2 rounds, then they don't see it as a chore or a burden. We should never use chanting in the form of a punishment or reward. We shouldn't say that if you don't chant your round today, you're not getting to play. Or if you chant today 2 rounds, and I'll let you eat ice cream. So we don't want to present chanting in a way that is the means for another end, rather it's the goal itself. So we make it positive by, I remember chanting with the children and encouraging them to imagine that Krishna is dancing on their tongues like that. Or sometimes as a community, we can get together every Ekadashi and chant together. And the children also can sit with us and chant. And then when they see the other children chanting and adults chanting, they try to do more and more rounds, and this way they get a taste. So children may start out very slow, chanting 1 or 2 rounds, but as they see the example of others and adults, and in their own house, they get inspired. We should not force them, but yet we should encourage them, so we have to apply both, and gradually they can actually increase their chanting. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji. We have Kavi Rupa Radhika Devi Mataji asking that kids, when they grow up and go to college, they really get attracted and influenced by friends who follow different religion and different environments and places. So in short, they get really attracted by Maya. How can we encourage them, that we engage them in chanting and reading Srimad Bhagavatam and along with their studies?
Yes, and that is a time when a child has a tendency to get distracted because of peer pressure, especially if they're going to school. Then there's so many other children who are not devotees, and they're doing all kinds of things. So that becomes very attractive for them, and they want to experiment things. So the best we can do in that situation is to give them Krishna consciousness at home, and also to provide an avenue in a temple where they can come together with other devotee children and do things together. Like, for example, have music sessions together where they're doing kirtan together, or have classes together, or engage them in doing volunteer work, some volunteer work in the temple. So in this way, they feel a part of the whole community. They feel a part, to give them some devotee friends where they understand Krishna is always part of the picture. Even devotee friends who are not so fixed up, even those are better than non-devotee friends, because Krishna is always part of that picture for them. and that's very nice for them. And how to keep their distraction is by sitting down and reading Srimad Bhagavatam with them, because when they read, then they realize that they get answers to their questions that's confusing them. They're trying to make sense of the world at that age, and Bhagavatam provides those answers for them, where it can be put in that perspective. Their struggles with the opposite sex, their struggles with, in general, with with bullying and things like that, all can be provided through discussions in the Srimad Bhagavatam. You can encourage your children to open their hearts. And actually, when you're doing Srimad Bhagavatam to children, you become really good friends with them. You become so close to them. It's amazing how Krishna consciousness will join hearts that nothing else will. Doing no material activities together will join hearts to that extent, between parents and children, and between teachers and students, the way Krishna consciousness will. And very soon you'll see that they're opening their hearts, and discussing things, their struggles with them. And that's the kind of communication you want with the children. And it will not come artificially. It will come through an avenue like that, where they're seeing it from others' perspective, but yet they can apply it in their life. Okay. So good discussion. Maybe sometime if the child is having very strong problems, you can send them to Mayapur, take them with you, maybe do Bhakti Shastri there together for 2-3 months. Let them go quit school for that time. It's okay. This is a very, very crucial time for them to develop their devotional qualities, because if they lose it, they may not get it back, right? Maybe they will. At some point, Krishna is going to pull the right button and bring himself back to them. But we can try different things, we can take them and they can do something like that, spend time, very good time, efficient time in the dham. Okay, so try different things, how to bring them back into, chanting, sometimes it's tough, trying to convince them to do japa, right? So like I said, maybe you can make teenage groups together where you have japa sessions together. Be creative, think of different ways where you can attract them, to Krishna consciousness. Maybe, maybe they like to hear some lectures by some particular Swami that they are attracted to, maybe they can go out and travel with them sometimes, where they can serve them. So it says how even a moment's association with a pure devotee is so valuable, right? And all these pure devotees always have time for young children, because they know it's such a crucial time, right? I mean, teenagers and older, right? So this way they can travel maybe a week with them and experience, somebody who's living scripture. And that goes really deep. So be creative and think of different ways. Don't push them very hard, but yet give them the alternatives, give them the joys of Krishna consciousness, how Krishna consciousness can be so attractive. Generally, children cannot love through fear. If you put too much fear in their hearts, they generally try to run away from that. So it has to be very positive, very positive.
Thank you, Mataji.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Our next question is from Padmamukhi Madhavi Mataji.
Mm-hmm.
She says, if there are any sites, like websites, where we can get pictorial representations for children below 5 years, and if you're aware of that, could you kindly share them with us?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. There are some devotees who've made some very pictorial depictions of Srimad Bhagavatam, and I've posted them in my group. That is, a Yahoo group that I don't have over here. Yeah, that if you join that group, then you will get those archives, where they, you can get those. Okay, let me see if I can. Oops. Hare Krishna. Yeah, I'll give them in a few minutes. Okay, I'll give it in a few minutes, Dharna. The Yahoo group. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
In the meanwhile, we have another question from Raj Lakshmi Mataji.
Mm-hmm.
She's asking, do we have any online program for kids for age group 8 to 14? and if she can also enroll her children. So she needs more details about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, we can definitely think about that, and let us, communicate through WhatsApp. Zarna, I can communicate with parents who are interested in something like that. Maybe I can give a few demo classes where I can take them through that, and I can train some parents to actually take the initiative to do that for the children of their yatra. I can give some classes on that level. So let's communicate on WhatsApp and follow this up. Okay.
Perfect. That sounds good, Mataji.
Mm-hmm.
We have Manjula Mataji. She
Mm-hmm.
says, because we are in Indian environment and homeschooling looks difficult,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the kids' future or career, in India, they have problems where there are less opportunities and they aren't taken into universities or abroad colleges. So how can one overcome this fear? She has 3 kids,
Mm-hmm.
14 years, 11 and 4 years girl. So
Mm-hmm.
she's just asking a question for you.
So her question is about homeschooling. How do they then end up in college? Is that a question?
In India, Mataji, homeschooling is not quite recognized, so
Yeah.
it makes it difficult for them to
Yeah.
progress in their, academically.
Yeah. So her
What are
question
the
is,
options?
so what is the question is how to do that? How to go around it? Or, yeah.
Yes, so I think Mataji is a little skeptical, so she wants to know what are her options. How can we go around this, and what can be done for her children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are a few homeschoolers in India and in different regions, in different areas of India, but they're not that many. So, you can get in touch with them. You can write to me, and I can put you in touch with them as to what they've done to do homeschooling in India. Um, there is an organization called NOI, which is National Institute of Learning. What is it? No, National Open School Learning or something. And they are giving credentials for those who want to homeschool, where they can give examinations. They can study at home and they can give examinations, which is recognized in universities and things. Or you can do it through other processes like they do in Mayapur and Vrindavan. They do through CBSE and all these other systems. So there's a few ways you can do it, and you will have to get into it and try to find what is the best for you. Okay. Otherwise, if that's impossible, then just you can send them to school, but then try to apply these principles that I've talked about in homeschooling Krishna's children, as well as these guidebooks. Okay.
Mataji, she's also mentioning that she's from Bahrain.
Oh, she's from Bahrain. Okay. I don't know what the situation in Bahrain is about homeschooling, whether it's legal or not legal, but I know there's one family over there who's doing it, and I forget her name. She's a family who's homeschooling her children in Bahrain. So maybe you can find out who she is and try to find out what is needed. In terms of sending the child eventually to university, I'm sure they are allowed. Certain universities in India do allow homeschoolers. It's not something, which is impossible. So, yeah, if you really are keen on homeschooling, you can give homeschooling maybe for till the age of 12 or something, and then they can go to school. You can try it this way also, you know. Okay.
Mataji, we also have requests from a few Matajis who are saying that they can take Srimad Bhagavatam classes for kids, basic stories to introduce Srimad Bhagavatam. And she would also like to learn and introduce Srimad Bhagavatam chapter by chapter. So do you have any classes even for parents who can help you in or assist you in this process?
Or in the process of taking out these books, of trying to create resources for these books, definitely I could use help, and I will be happy to get any help that is being offered. And in terms of teaching parents how to teach their children Srimad Bhagavatam, I'm always available to help in that area as well. I can definitely, train parents to teach their own children or to the other children how to study Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so yes, on both counts, I'll be happy to accept that. Is
Thank
that
you,
one?
Mataji.
Yeah, go ahead. Mhm.
Yes. Mataji, we also have questions about food habits.
Mhm.
So how to avoid onion, garlic in, restaurants food, when they actually see other children can have it and they can't. And how do we motivate and convince them?
Yes. Yeah, this motivation comes through, one side of spiritual life is the practical side where we do certain things, like we do a, morning program, we chant and we read, all these things are there. In other words, a practical devotional service, right? We reach out, we do preaching. But the other side is the theoretical part, which provides the foundation and provides gives us the impetus to do our practical side, right? And that is given through the Shastras. That's why introducing Shastras early on to our children, especially through Srimad Bhagavatam, which is more of a fun way for children to learn philosophy, then that becomes very, very valuable in convincing them how they must not eat those things. Otherwise it becomes just simply something that's been, they resent it and they deny it and they don't want to follow that, right? So in other words, they have to be given the tools of why it's so important to be a devotee and the philosophy behind it, why we avoid to eat, why we avoid these things. Okay, so it must be backed by this kind of learning. Okay, so that's why I emphasize that along with whatever you're doing nicely, please introduce the study of Srimad Bhagavatam to our children, which gives them the tools by which they can make sense of why they are devotees.
Thank you, Mataji.
Mm-hmm.
There's another question. It's been asked that how do we correct the kids when they do things repeatedly incorrect? How do we instruct them again and again, even if mistakes happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the best way to discipline our children is by giving them the higher taste. Okay. The problems of misbehavior can be more easily solved if we give them the higher taste. If we engage their minds in Krishna and related to Krishna activities, then naturally there's a less of a tendency to do these kind of nonsensical things, right? So this is what we are, as devotees, this is what we try to help us. You always engage them, in different activities and ways where they can serve Krishna. I remember when I was homeschooling my children, my children never remembered a time when they actually sat and did school. Their life was like one big play. We were so active, doing so many things in the temple. We were preparing for festivals, for preaching programs, for devotee get-togethers, for prasadam distribution, and this is what they can remember. But the thing is that while the children are doing this, it's a great way to be educated. It's a great way to learn, right? When we interact with people, when we reach out to people, these are practical ways. If you simply sit with them and just study without doing the practical side, that is also not good. But if you just do the practical side without giving food for the brain, then that's also not good. So we have to give a balance of both, give a balance of both. And this way, we'll see how the misbehavior diminishes. Gradually, it will go away and become less and less and less.
Thank you, Mataji.
And some
Just a quick
discipline,
question.
just one more point, some discipline may be required. It's not that we treat our children in a way that makes them totally irresponsible, right? We don't want to raise children like that either. So there has to be discipline, but obedience is only there if there is real training, if there's also love. So we have to give both. The children should both love and fear their parents or teachers. So they should be both elements. So we give them the love, but we also provide the discipline. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
That's so important. Thank you, Mataji. We have Hema Mataji asking a quick question. What should be the duration to tell a story to an 8 to 12-year-old and even discuss with them? What should we keep as a duration?
Good question, because I forgot to mention that when we're reading with our children, if we have 1 hour time, for example, or even half hour, then we can kind of have a rough structure plan like that, because generally with me it's like it takes me an hour to finish typically one chapter, because there, even though it may be sometimes a chapter which has got 40 verses or 45 verses, and some chapters maybe 25 verses, but we'll see how in terms of the points of discussion, even with a chapter that's 40 verses, there may be many verses we just want to read through quickly and not really discuss, right? It's not that when we are doing this system of taking turns and reading and discussing that we have to discuss every verse and puppet. No, puppet, they don't have anything to deal with that. It's us who are reading the purpose ahead of time, if we have time, right? But the point is that we don't discuss everything. Because otherwise it'll become, if we're taking too long to finish a chapter, then also becomes like a discouraging factor for our children. Sometimes parents spend a whole hour just reading one verse and one purport. It's very nice for adults, but not for children. We need to move at a pace where we can stop for discussion when we need to. And that discussion, that point can go on for some time if it's very important. It's not like we have to move on then if the discussion is going really well. But yet we don't have to do for every verse. And and even boring things, so-called boring things, that children find, like for example prayers by different personalities, you can make it very interesting, by picking out some certain points in that, where or you can do for example that prayer, with when Indra went to Vishwarupa and he gave the Narayan Kavach. It was just so much fun, because all that come in the form of the prayers were praying to Krishna to give them this power and that power to protect their body, and to give them the power to smash their enemies through these weapons. They were praying to Sudarshan disc, like that, and it became like a fun thing for them. But yet in the end Krishna says, you know what, I'm really disappointed with you, because you want all these favors from me. A pure devotee doesn't ask for all these favors. So then we read about how when the demigods are praying, how different it is from a pure devotee, right? So when Queen Kunti says her prayers, it's so different from when Indra or the demigods pray, right? But yet everybody has a right to pray to Krishna at their own level, and everybody is asking, what they want from Krishna. So like that. So seemingly boring parts can also become very very good, but yet you'll get a feel of how much time you think, because you have to look at the faces of your children and see how much whether they really are enjoying it. And sometimes you may have to take a little break. I would take a little break. They would eat something, maybe a snack or something, and then we sit again. Because I had all the time, because I was homeschooling them. I didn't have there was no bell ringing that the class was over. So I had more freedom in that way. But even when I don't now, when I'm teaching other children, even then I know my time is only 1 hour. I make it. I feel it out. Okay, and you feel it out, because if you stop halfway and the second half doesn't have any points of discussion, then next time when you start, it won't be so enthusiastic for them. So we read through it quickly and then get to the next one, like that, depending on also on the age of the child, how much he can take. The bottom line is that the children should really enjoy it, and take it in.
Thank you very much, Mataji.
Mm-hmm.
We have our next question from Vishwa Kalyan Prabhuji and Sirisha Mataji.
Mm-hmm.
They're asking how to control the use of gadgets, the electronic gadgets and internet for our children.
Yeah, that's a whole topic, Prabhu. But it's a very nice, a very good question. But it really would take a long time for me to get into that and answer that. Maybe, we can talk about it in another session, the dangers of internet and TV and how to control it and what are some of the things we can do to help our children, discourage our children from using it. I'm totally for it, but at the same time it's a fact of life that internet has become a part, an intrinsic part of the lives of our children. Even in schools now they're required to use it. So how do we deal with that? And my answer to that is that to train our children to use it as a tool rather than as something that they as an entertainment, as a form of entertainment. Okay, like just browsing is not good. The tool means, when we use it as a tool, means that okay, we have something to do. I've gotten homework from school and I'm supposed to use it. Okay, we use it and then we log off, right? For adults, it's like doing emails. It's replacing the post office. We have emails we have to do. Okay, we do them, but we log off. This type of internet browsing or always keeping it on mode is very, very bad. And very, very detrimental, because what happens is then children, they end up going on sites that we don't want them to go on. It's very, very hard to control. So by giving them this training and engaging their free time in more meaningful activities, coming together as a family, doing things, fun things together, then that will naturally create more togetherness and give them less time where their minds are meditating on these things. Okay, so yes, we should say no to them, now before it's too late. Okay, and don't give them access to phones until they are older, much older. You can give them a flip phone if they need to take some phone to school. They'll give them a flip phone, because this is like, now in studies have been done in America where young children, they actually feel that they wish that their parents did not introduce them to smartphones so early in their life, because there's been a rise in suicide and so many other problems through social, sites and things like that, where children are trying to find relationships through these social networking sites. um, and and these social networking sites are not a substitute for having real friends in real life. In fact, it creates so much frustration because it's not the real world. People are projecting themselves in a way that's not reality. Okay. So anyway, this is a big topic. Okay. But it's something to think about. A very good topic to think about. Definitely. Hare Krishna.
Great.
Mhm.
Mataji, just on the note that you've said, we
Mhm.
have another question which is very similar.
Okay.
Rohini Mataji is asking, how can we divert kids
Mhm.
from having teenage love affairs when they are in the adolescent age?
Mhm. Mhm. Yes. So again, I'm experiencing here with devotee children that's rampant, in schools and everything, everywhere is there. In fact, a child who's by the age of 13, a girl or boy, they've already had intimate relationships and things like that. Now, if children are growing up in that kind of really atmosphere, environment, how do we prevent all that, right? Again, is through reading Srimad Bhagavatam that I spoke earlier, is giving them a perspective of what does it mean to have proper relationships, why it's not proper to associate freely, with girls and boys. Now in schools nowadays, it's all co-ed, and so it's very difficult to avoid interaction with the opposite sex. Yet there's a difference between uh, the superficial relationship and intimate relationship, and that is what is to be avoided. That is what is to be avoided, is when we actually share things, we share food with each other, or we share intimate situations, settings. Now that is very, very detrimental for their life. And that understanding actually comes through studying Srimad Bhagavatam, where again and again this is explained, where uh, relationships like that is looked down upon, and for very, very important reasons. So because when we see in the world so many value systems are changing practically every day, every year, then how do we show them the standard value system, which is perfect, which doesn't change over time? And that's through Srimad Bhagavatam. Even though we change according to time, place, and circumstances, but there are basic principles that never change, right? And that is the free mixing of girl and boy, right? Man and woman. The free mixing is very, very considered very, very detrimental, and it comes through stories. In specific, the story of Kardamuni and Devahuti, is very, very nice purports. So if parents take the time to read those purports, they will be able to present the children with that kind of scenario. Why, it's important that they don't freely associate with the opposite sex. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji. We have our next question from Gopi Geeta Mataji. She says that her child is above 12 and is not much inclined. But if she still wants to inculcate the principles from Srimad Bhagavatam, how can that be helped, or how can she, present it for her child?
Yes. Again, I mentioned earlier, peer groups, make peer groups of other children, devotee children, do things together where they get some taste of Krishna consciousness. Of course, right now everything is shut down, but when it does open up, having bhakti vrikshas where children can participate in different things, practical devotional things, but also, again, having besides an adult bhakti shastri, to have a simultaneously another program for children is very, very important. We must take care of our children. We must this training should not be just for adults, it's for children, because they are the future of our society, the future of this movement. And so we must make the effort to have programs for them where they can be engaged. And one way is to have classes for them also. Classes where they can open their minds, where things are discussed openly and nicely, where they feel free to discuss, share friendships like that. So giving them different avenues to engage in this way. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji. Just trying to find the next question we have. So there's one question that we have is, how would I know if you are conducting classes for children on Zoom in future?
Yes, what I plan to do is maybe I can give you the Zoom for the classes that are already existing that I'm doing. And if you, if you listen to those, you may get some idea of how to conduct these classes for our children. And that becomes a very easy way. Some parents have been listening in and they found them helpful, in learning the process. But if you just, if you take the plunge and just do it, then I'll tell you, Krishna will really give you the tools and help that you need in terms of keep it going and interesting and practical. All these things, Krishna will definitely help you to do the, to become, to give you the help that you need. Okay. So I would say that just do it, and you'll see that help will come, and yes, you can definitely tune into my classes, existing classes, and take help from that. Also, I've been following up with some demo classes also, so I can help out with that. If initially people still feel that they need more help, then I can also do that.
Thank you, Mataji. We have a question from Pavana Gaur Prema Prabhu. He's taking classes for youth boys in Dubai.
Yes.
And mostly the age group is 12 to 15 years. Now, most of the parents are not in Krishna consciousness. Because of this, boys who are attending the class are not serious.
Yes.
So how will he encourage them to take up, Krishna consciousness nicely?
Yes. Well, I had that same struggle when I was in the temple in Boise, and most of the children in my Sunday class, they were all coming from homes who were not really practicing, at least initially. And what I would do is I would do these discussion stories from different parts of Bhagavatam, and I really didn't worry about that part. I gave what I had to give them, and then and as the children get more and more enthused, then naturally it's going to rub off on the parents also. But because the children were being engaged in the Sunday school, the parents ended up coming to the temple. And when they saw the children engage in dramas and plays, then they would become more enthusiastic. And by becoming more enthusiastic, they would start engaging in practical devotional service and maybe start to attend one class or something. And this way their devotional life would begin, because the children were good examples. Like, even though they may not be practicing at home so well, but because the temple is providing the avenue to train them, the parents get enthused. Okay, and gradually it will come through, slowly and steadily.
Right. We've got another question from Anisha Mataji.
Mm-hmm.
She's asking, what is your opinion about the attraction to chocolate and store-bought cookies, in addition to, when we talk about food?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the on the level that we want to be at. In other words, there's some people some devotees in the world who absolutely don't think there's anything wrong in eating chocolates. So it all depends. It's our choice and the way we see it. So, okay.
Thank you, Mataji.
ये इसके अंदर बोल रहा था
Can I ask everyone to kindly put yourself on mute? There are parents talking, which is disturbing the class. Mataji, should we take a few more questions?
Well, let's see. There's still 160 participants. Okay, a few more. Yes.
Okay, our next question is from Gopi Gana Geeta Mataji.
Mm-hmm.
Raising children from young age with spiritual topics, the children might easily continue to do. But what about the children who have been growing in materialistic way and now are in their teen?
Again,
how do we give them the
yes,
energy?
yeah, that's more of a challenge and more of a struggle. But I've already mentioned that how we can kind of try to trick them into Krishna consciousness, like bringing them to the temple, giving them good association, with other devotee children, and also the other adult association also as well, like in having them volunteer some nice devotional work for the temple, or taking them to Mayapur or Vrindavan, exposing them to the holy dham, and so many nice ways. Maybe they can join a yatra, Radhanath Swami's yatra, which he does every year, or they can join some other sannyasi's yatra. So many yatras, so many facilities. Now ISKCON has so many things that's available, and you're so close to India, so you can take advantage of those things. Because when they're exposed even for a week to association, such elevated association, is going to rub on them. Okay, it's going to rub on them. So see what their tendency is, see what their inclination is, and trying to find avenues like that. But every child likes adventure, right? So when we take them to the Holy Dham and they join some yatra, then that's an adventure for them. So it can be presented in such a nice, fun way for them. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji. Mataji, there are a couple of questions. Participants wanted to know if they can have a view to your pages of the book. So if just a few pages of the books that you've written, and if there is a soft copy.
Yeah, well, I've provided the pictures here of the books, the guidebooks, what they look like. And what I would suggest is just get a copy or a few copies from Mayapur, and then you can look at it and see whether it works. I mean, right now, Mayapur has some books which they're selling for 400 rupees for Canto 1 per book, and which is very, very cheap. and that's including shipping. That's including shipping, you know. So I mean, yeah, so if you get one of these books, if you get just Canto 1 and you begin with that, you even order one book, then I think that will be valuable to get an idea, you know. uh, but basically the response I've had from these books has been very, very positive, you know, all over the world. In fact, Mayapur and Vrindavan, they're both using these books as their, Vrindavan is using it as a curriculum book to teach them English as well as Shastra from these books. Mayapur is using them to teach systematic study of Bhagavatam for their children, all the way from primary to middle school. So they're using these books systematically, and so for their children. So that's positive. Whereas, and then of course, many Sunday schools and all over the world, they're using these books as part of their Sunday curriculum, and also as part of their day schools, gurukulas, you know. So it's had a great response because it's the first time that we are trying to provide a systematic study for our children, chapter by chapter, canto by canto. But I want to point out, it doesn't replace this process of reading directly from Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, and discussing. And then after we do that, we begin with these books. However, if we haven't, if you were to begin somewhere in the middle, like Prahlad, we have not come up to seventh canto. So you can do that, story, Prahlad or Dhruva, but also you can simultaneously, you can also do these guidebooks from volume 1, you know. So because it's presented in a way that children, there's a lot of activities, so children have a lot of fun doing this, but they're at the same time learning a lot, you know. So I would encourage you to just get a few books and see what they're like. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji. We have a question about training to be given to teachers. There's someone who's just asked if if you conduct any courses or trainings for teachers, because they find it very challenging to present such an important topic of Srimad Bhagavatam to the kids.
Okay.
And if yeah, sure.
Yeah, definitely. I can do a demo class with them. You know, I can do a demo class from any part of the Bhagavatam, or I can do a demo class on how to teach from these guidebooks, you know, that I'm showing here on the slide, you know, where if parents need more explanation of that, I can also do that. Definitely, like I said, I can work on the next follow-up class, the demo class, to encourage those who are interested, you know, in learning more.
That'll be great, Mataji. We have Javana Mataji asking a couple of questions. So her first question is how to manage temper tantrums in children, how to inculcate good values in the child, and is Sanskrit language essential for teaching shlokas?
Okay, so going backwards, Sanskrit, Prabhupada said that if for children, it's good to teach them Sanskrit because they're starting early, and generally learning Sanskrit really well takes about 12 years. However, I've seen children who've learned for 6 years and they're pretty good. So, but good learning will take at least 12 years. So if you start early, yes, you can teach them Sanskrit, and it does help them to appreciate Shastra more because they can appreciate it in the original language. And however, this is not possible for all parents due to circumstances and all, then you can teach them Sanskrit through the verses, definitely. And I know many great personalities in our movement who have learned Sanskrit just through Prabhupada's books, and they are just so amazing. So yes, so if you have either one of the way you can go, you know, if you have the facility, you have a Sanskrit teacher who can teach, a devotee teacher preferably, then that's nothing like that, you know. But there's other ways as well.
Sure. Mataji, we have a question from Lakshmi Priya Mataji. How can we manage with the children school work, homework, and Srimad Bhagavatam reading at the same time?
Very good question. it's a real challenge, isn't it? Especially if they're going to school and they come back with so many homework and so many things to do. So, the way I see it, children always need some downtime, right? I mean, after, school can be exhausting and all that. So they always need time where they can just forget about everything, right? So if you cannot do it every day, at least do it 3 times a week, or even if you cannot do it 3 times a week, do it twice a week. If you cannot do it once a week on the weekends. It's nice to make the effort to do at least something, because we can always find that time, right? It's always nice for the family to come together, maybe even just one parent if the other parent is busy, right? And to do that with our children, because it really, like I said earlier, it really helps you connect with the children in ways that is much deeper, and you'll always have that that intimate feeling with your children, because you've been doing Bhagavatam with them, that would be very valuable in later life. So see it like that. And then once you begin, you'll see how children will get so enthused, they'll forget their tiredness. So see what you can do, okay? See what's practical in your way, but at least make the effort and to try to do it. Okay, I know one parent wasn't doing it at all, and then she started doing it every day, and she just loves it. And then there was a time when things fell apart a little bit, and she stopped it. And then, but because she had that taste of doing Bhagavatam with her child every day, she could now not give it up. And now she's thinking, and now she's coming back to it, of reading it. So once that taste comes, you'll, even though at times you may fall back, it'll come back. There are times when things are so crazy you may not be able to do it, but that doesn't mean that we stop doing it. We may have some days when we cannot do it, but yet we carry on after that, like that. And you don't have to do it for an hour. You can reduce the time, according to what you can spare, like that.
Thank you, Mataji. I'd like to read one of the questions that's been asked as it is.
Mhm.
So they're very happy to listen to your enlightening lectures. And Satya Achyuta Prabhuji is saying, since you told us in the beginning of the class that Srila Prabhupada confirmed that our children are divine children, and they have come to us to complete their journey back to Godhead. Suppose a family come into Krishna consciousness and the children are not fully convinced to follow this process. How do we consider those kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, due to outside environment, children get distracted, and it's hard for them because they're hearing something else over there and they're hearing something else at home, right? So it's a huge conflicting situation for them, and sometimes when you think of it, it's totally understandable, why they're going through what they're going through. So we have to deal it with with a mood of understanding, that, okay, what are these children going through and why are they struggling? And we try to do the best we can, right? Our own example is good. Also trying to, being a friend to them, rather than being, when children get that, when they become old, like 15, 16, like that, then we have to see them as friends, more like somebody, like a teacher. So in this way, we change our mood and we attract them, in a way that they don't see it like a big burden or something threatening to their way of life. Like we are preaching to them that they're bad children and they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Then they kind of back off. They feel like, okay, this is not what I want, and they start rebelling, right? But if it's presented in a way which is they can feel comfortable with, they feel that we are not fanatics, trying to preach to them, then they tend to be more comfortable. So we have to create that environment where we don't, we don't encourage them to run away, rather that they can embrace it. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mataji. There's a question from Pooja Mataji.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to know, in terms of time, how much time of sadhana can a 6-year-old, or should a 6-year-old do in a day?
Yeah. Like it depends on the child. A 6-year-old, I would say, very, maybe, she can chant. It depends on the child, but she can probably end up chanting half a round, maybe, or maybe a round. So I've seen children, all different children at different stages. So again, we don't want to push them too hard, but at the same time, if you can encourage them where they sit with you, even if they do half a round, you applaud them and you say, wow, this is so amazing. You chanted half a round for Krishna. Look at this. It's so amazing. So always that encouragement has to be there. Um, so I was thinking, Zarma, should we stop? How many more questions do you have over there?
I think over the in the groups, two groups that we have,
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to have one last question. With your permission, if I can.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So we've got this question from Lakshmi Sundari Mataji.
Mm-hmm.
A
Yes.
little kirtan and invocation prayers should be conducted definitely before reading with them. That's a question she's asking. Should we do a little kirtan or prayer just before reading Srimad Bhagavatam?
Mm-hmm.
And can things be made casual while reading with kids, or one has to give a formal setup of sitting in crossed legs, or proper etiquette needs to be maintained at all times?
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, we're dealing with children. So children tend to get restless depending on their age, and they want to run around and do things. And I was very flexible on those things because uh, what I wanted really for them is to hear, because I knew I could understand that Srimad Bhagavatam was so potent that if they just heard it, it would change, it will affect their hearts, right? So I when they were young, I allowed them to be to be engaged physically in something while they heard me. And I remember doing like an hour sessions while they would be doing fidgeting and doing these things, playing with something or drawing something. And like for example, I remember one time I was doing a story and I said, okay, here's the paper and pencil and color pencils, and you can draw whatever we are talking about. So this became a real interesting thing for them, and so they started drawing the theme of the story, or whoever the character of the story was. And so this way it looked like, oh, they'll be engaged. No, but they were listening. And then as I was discussing, they participate in that discussion. So because they were at the stage where, okay, sometimes they cannot read that much. Like they cannot continuously keep reading. So at a certain point, they don't want to read. Okay, that's fine. Then I'm reading, and then I'm explaining and talking to them and discussing with them. Okay, so I don't know what the original question was, but I hope I've answered that question. I'm not sure, actually.
Thank you, Mataji. So, Mataji, I believe we have one question which was, there were two parts of the question. One was answered. Mataji's come back to me just saying if you can say a few lines on how to manage temper tantrums with children.
Yeah, I did talk a little bit about discipline, didn't I? So again, engagement, giving them the higher taste, right? Or especially temper tantrums. Okay, so well, again, some discipline is needed, but then we just that discipline has to be given in a mood of in a mood of love. In other words, the child knows that there's a lot of love there, but yet the discipline has to be there. So different mothers try different things. I know one mother who would take the child into a separate room and just be with the child rather than leaving the child in a dark room. She would be with the child the whole time while he calmed down and he could understand that why it's important that he doesn't have the tantrum. And then she would come out with him. So things like that. So we don't do punishment where we deny them food or we deny them Krishna conscious things, because that gives a very negative feeling. So in other words, my approach would be more positive, something that doesn't give them more opportunities to rebel, but rather gives them more opportunity gives them more facility to an incentive to improve. Okay. In other words, there should be so much love and trust between the parents and children that they would want to get better because they want to please their parents. The biggest incentive a child has in good behavior is that my parents will be pleased. That is their focus. I want to please my parents. So, so if we cultivate that mood of trust between us and our children, there's less likelihood of tender tantrums. I know one child who had a real problem with anger, really bad problem with anger. And as he started reading Bhagavatam with his mother, believe me, that anger, it was such a problem that literally it was so bad that she would shake up, like, you know, so something from his last life or something he was bringing. But then over time, reading Bhagavatam with him, the anger problem went away. That it was like a temper tantrum. It just went away. You know, because these stories are like that, you know, talking about anger, so many places, you know, where we talk about anger, the anger of the four sages, then the anger of Dhruva versus anger of Durvasa Muni, different types of anger and how to, what is good anger, what is bad anger, how to, you know, of course we don't put all, like, we don't explain it, you know, with all these tons of stories to them, they'll get confused at one time. But what I'm saying is that over time, as they're getting these messages through different stories, they get the point and they become calmer and calmer and calmer. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mataji, for answering all our questions, queries, and doubts diligently and very, very patiently.